Other than that, I'm going to introduce our presenter today. So Adam Ziegel is a consultant on our revenue cycle strategies team and a recent full-time MBA graduate. Prior to his MBA, he served on the front lines of patient access of the health system in Columbus, Ohio, before transitioning into healthcare technology, where he helped implement revenue cycle software solutions, including Epic, at multiple top-ranked health systems. Adam.
Thank you, Dusty, and thank you all for joining. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. And as he said, we've got a wordy title here, but what we're really talking about is that we have designed here at Vitalware highly customizable charge capture solutions, and we believe that they add some real value and are necessary and great additions to the marketplace and to our offerings. So I'm going to jump right in. As I work through the information today, there'll be a couple of pieces here related to some of the rules that we have and overall coding items. So this disclaimer basically just says that what we're talking about here is an overview and not intended to be any specific coding advice for any potential case or account that you might be reviewing. Today, we're going to talk briefly about sort of three main areas. We're going to touch on why charge capture. I guess since most of you have joined today, you have some idea about charge capture and its use. But nonetheless, we will touch base on that, look at some statistics, our sort of expertise in this space, and any of the revenue challenges that are out there. Additionally, we're going to be looking at how we're solving those. So this your data, your rules, your view promise that we're sort of attaching to our products here relates directly to that customization and making sure that we're delivering to you all what you would need to see, and none of the sort of fluff or false positives or additional pieces that are going to add time and frustration to your work. We'll look at our solutions and we'll see a VitalIntegrity demo. Then at the end, we'll just sort of touch base on a couple of additional opportunities coming up in the future. So continuing forward, we have a couple of quick stats here about revenue leakage. HFMA has reported that hospitals are underpaid between 2 and 5% of net patient revenue. I think we all know it's very difficult to capture every item that's occurring and to ensure that we're meeting all of the payer policies across each of the different commercial payers, Medicare, with everything changing. Becker's has suggested that even that 68% of hospitals with the comprehensive revenue integrity solution are seeing an increase in gross revenue. That makes sense if we're capturing missing charges, if we're avoiding compliance issues, if we're not being audited as much. All of that's going to generate additional revenue and reduce costs. And lastly, then specifically in the charge capture vein, it's commonly reported that as much as 1% of the potential net revenue is lost due to charge capture issues. We here at Vitalware consider ourselves mid-revenue cycle solution experts, and not only do we consider ourselves that, we have a pretty proud stamp of approval as best in class the last 2 years for our chargemaster solution. It is sort of this fundamental understanding of the mid-revenue cycle space that has driven our, fire and passion for branching into charge capture and thinking about leveraging some of the same sort of best-in-class approaches that we took through the development of our CDM product into these charge capture solutions that we're discussing today. As was mentioned with those statistics, right, there are many revenue challenges that hospitals see that you all are encountering each day that we've experienced here on our team and our work on those departments as well. And it can be anywhere from obviously never coded charges, missing charges, incorrect charges, medical necessity issues, NCCI edits, under and overcharging documentation errors, incorrect gender codes. Thinking of the CDM, we can have codes that are linked to the wrong shell. We have codes that no longer exist. We have items that aren't linked correctly from maybe a radiology system across to the CDM and then onto a claim. And so all of those pieces lead to difficulties. And given them, that's why we've created these two solutions, VitalIntegrity and VitalAnalysis, as you see there in this sort of graphic. We believe that we have placed them strategically. We'll touch base on sort of the differences between those two in a little bit. But obviously, after the patient comes in and we begin to document, we then have two sort of places where one can think about big picture, addressing potential charge capture issues, these revenue challenges that we just mentioned. One would be pre-billing. So the coding is perhaps in, maybe we don't have all of the soft coding there, but we have any hard coding, we've made it through bill min days, and we're gonna jump in at that moment, capture all of that data, process it, and then really try to alleviate and remediate as many of these problems as we can to avoid rebills, to get out both clean claims and complete claims. And then the second piece there for VitalAnalysis is sort of post that period. So perhaps it's a system where you don't have the resources or you don't have the time to engage daily in that pre-billing workflow. So there's still a lot of value that can be generated from a sort of post-claim, post-reimbursement analysis. And so we also offer that product. There, one can still work claims individually, but there's not necessarily the exact same sort of time crunch with the pre-billing space where one needs to get in there, at that moment before the claim is generated and really address these potential concerns. We're excited about both of them. We think they both have great value, and we are always happy to chat through, what might be right for anyone's system as we go. With those two products, as we've mentioned, and as the sort of webinar summary description detailed, we have this promise, right? Your data, your rules, your view. And so what does that mean? The first piece there, your data, it means we're going to have a daily review of 100% of your itemized charges for VitalIntegrity or of 837 institutional claims for vital analysis. And what 100% means, obviously that means we're going to have all the data that we would get from you and process it through our system. But on top of that, it means we're going to display that information to you all. So we can identify issues that are not only revenue, but are also compliance driven. We can look over the course of 3, 6, 12 months as we begin to work and find any trends or perhaps issues that have arisen but weren't originally there. And it means that we're targeting sort of the full spectrum of this charge capture world, not just targeting high revenue, not just targeting overcharges for compliance or audit issues. We want to give you the full picture, and then we'll work with you as an expert to really drive towards the solutions that make sense for your system. Within these products, of course, with your view, we're going to always have analytics on revenue and compliance opportunities. These analytics connect to your data as well. We have the ability to customize rules. So when we jump in here into the demo, you're going to see a bunch of global rules, but they aren't yours if you can't customize them. If you can't say, well, we also use 93265, let's add that code. It's not really yours. If we can't turn off that rule because you already have an edit built into your billing system, it's not yours. And if you can't build a rule from scratch, it's not yours. And so we have sort of these layers from our expertise and expert guided rules that are based on the best clinical practices, all the way down to making sure that the custom edits that you need are going to be in the system. We provide directionally correct net revenue calculation based on sort of an industry standard calculation using national data through the standard analytical file for Medicare or based on OPPS actual payment rates. That information is going to be directionally correct, but we can work specifically to provide more granular and accurate information for each client based on your payers, if you have percentage charge payers, et cetera, contracts, and so on. Reconciliation, right? Any tool like this, if we can't get reports out of it, it's not going to be as valuable. We need to know what happened, why it's happening, what we've improved, and what sort of ROI we're capturing. So we have that in there, and we'll see that today. We have support from a dedicated team of charge capture experts. I think that sort of is a table stakes, goes without saying, but we do have some excellent people here who have lots of experience and have really been in the trenches working on this at individual health systems beyond just being at a technology company. And the last piece there, I think, is obviously a promise across all of our offerings here at Vitalware, but that's what we're going to give web-based SaaS solutions that are going to basically facilitate easy implementation and maintenance, right? You don't have to manage or update products on your side on any servers or in any specific applications in terms of like your computers, especially useful nowadays where people are working from home. It's all there online no matter where you are. We talked about it, right? Your data, we will take 100% of your charges and we're going to give full visibility into what we're seeing. We're not going to filter that through our own lens based on our own priorities. You're going to get it all. We're going to work with you to make sure you're focused on what matters. Rules, we have that global system that is shining a light on charge capture weaknesses. They are evidence-backed. And what that means, I think, in terms of why we've targeted a rules engine, is that we know that there's a lot of data that can happen, charging practices that occur across the country that suggest that it might be proper to bill a certain code with another code. But just because everyone's doing it, as we all might have learned when we were younger, doesn't mean it's right. And so we have this engine driven on evidence-based, clinically backed, policy-driven rules that can be then audited and manipulated to your needs, customized for value for you, but also going to guarantee that it's going to always live within that evidence-based nature. And then yes, concurrent and real-time review. That just means that these rules are not a static entity. We are always working, our content team always working, analyzing any of the LCDs and NCDs that come out or additional guidance from CMS. Obviously with COVID, we've all had tons of changes lately, and that impacted our team as well. And so all of those pieces are constantly being analyzed and sort of updated within the product. And the last piece here, your review. This is really the day-to-day, right? Your rules is the back end. You're not going to see them a lot of the times. Your data, you're not going to see most of the time. That's just going to happen naturally. Your view is how do we present this to you? And our fundamental goal and promise is that we're going to maximize workflow efficiency. So we can automate how pieces flow using case routing, make sure it goes to the right team in terms of perhaps like this is a cardiology issue, it's going to go to our cardiology, charge integrity team, charge capture team, or make sure that it goes to a specific person. So it all depends on the size of your system, your staffing, and so on, but we can leverage that routing to make sure that we're going to deliver those high value audits to each member each day. And then of course, personalized and tailored, that's sort of a slightly different feature from the case routing. And that just means that some users perhaps are going to be focused on revenue. And so they're going to want to see the revenue, high dollar amounts at the top of the screen. Others might be more interested in compliance or sort of root cause analysis. And so perhaps they're going to sort and group the fields in a different way. And we'll see that sort of customization of the view in just a moment. Last piece to touch on before I'm going to dive into the demo, knowing that time is limited here, are the two products that we've previously mentioned. So VitalIntegrity, right? This is a pre-bill solution, as we saw a few slides back. It's capturing all of that itemized billing data. And of course, pre-bill, what that means is that we would hope and we would encourage you all to correct those missing or miscoded charges before a claim is generated. The idea being that a great charge capture tool is not only going to generate a clean claim. I think most of us are operating with scrubbers or clearinghouses that are good at getting a clean claim, but a charge capture solution is good at getting a clean and complete claim. And so that's going to prevent rebilling and ensure that earned revenue that is documented and has been earned that you've provided to your patients is going to be captured. And that also means that your patients will know that they're going to be confident that what they're receiving, what their insurance is receiving is accurate. That avoids costly denials and rebilling. And yes, it does require some consistent and timely engagement to get these pre-bill audits, right? We can't sit there and say, oh, this isn't that important and not bill for 21 days because that's going to drive us all crazy. We want to make sure the AR days stay low, and we want to make sure that we're driving in an efficient manner. We've talked about the automated work assignments, and then the multi-view approach is stating that we're capturing all itemized billing data. Not only is it the soft-coded, HIM-driven pieces, but also anything hard-coded through your CDM. We take ICD-10 diagnosis codes, ICD-10 PCS diagnoses, and so we've got that whole big picture in VitalIntegrity. Then on the other side of that is the Vital Analysis solution. It looks a lot like VitalIntegrity, so what we're seeing today is going to be very similar to Vital Analysis, but the big difference there is that it's a post-bill 837 institutional claims solution. So rebilling can be leveraged to capture earned revenue. Obviously, across institutions, some people have different thresholds for when they do or don't rebill, but it is a valuable tool. If you find you're missing $12,000, you might as well go ahead and rebill it because that's probably going to be worth the cost and time of doing the rebill. And it allows for a bit more flexible engagement whenever resources are available because it isn't going to be that daily audit. The other sort of piece that's relevant for Vital Analysis, because 837 institutional claims are what are already generated from every health system to send to the payers, those are typically relatively simple to get from an IT team. There's not a difficulty per se with VitalIntegrity, but it might be a slightly heavier lift for that first sort of implementation phase. Either way, great products, great reasons to work through them. And as I mentioned, we love talking about which of these is going to be most valuable for any client who comes to us and is sort of looking for this type of solution. So on that note, I'm going to just pause for a moment to breathe. I think I threw a lot of information at you, and so I'll give you all a pause. We're hopping into a demonstration of VitalIntegrity. So I'm going to grab a glass of water, and we're jumping back in. What we see here, if my screen wants to cooperate with me, which it will, is VitalIntegrity. So VitalIntegrity fundamentally is a product that is going to display the data that we've taken from you, those 100% of your itemized billing data, flows through the rules engine that we've customized for your needs, and then appears here in VitalIntegrity with the sort of your view piece of our promise. We are viewing what amounts to de-identified demo data. So there's nothing here that relates to anyone, any real patient. It's all de-identified. And we're also seeing a lot of it. You might notice at the bottom, 54,000 items. I certainly hope none of you all are trying to do charge capture audits on that many items. This is not a normal day-to-day. This is 6 months of data from multiple health systems just to sort of provide a nice base, a robust place for us to demo this to you. So this is the final stage of the your data, your rules, your view promise. And we're actually going to jump back to the your rules and then end up here. So when we think about your rules, we have what amounts to sort of a back-end system that's processing all this information, and we call them our global rules. These are those content-driven evidence-based rules that our team is managing and constantly updating. And you'll see we have a bunch of them. Here's just one through whatever. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and each specific rule has multiple details, and so it can easily extrapolate out into millions of rules for us. Looking at a specific global rule to get a feel of how these function within our system, I'm going to just hop across here to a different tab, so that I'm not going to have to go through the motions of opening these rules. But this is Rule 782. That number has no real meaning. What does have meaning here is the rule name. So we're saying this is a rule we've created. It's a missing procedure insertion of a dual chamber rate responsive pacemaker. You'll notice that we are able to enable and disable any of these rules. So if this is something that you at your health system say, we wouldn't need this, we already have an edit for this, we can disable that. We can make this Medicare only, we can set specific date ranges, and we can basically customize all of these details here. You'll see our directionally correct gross and net charges here that can also be specified for your particular payer needs at your facility. And the rule itself is driven by the conditions that I see at the bottom of the screen. So on the left side, we see a C1785. That is going to be a dual chamber rate responsive pacemaker. So if we identify that on a either itemized bill, or if we identify that on an 837 claim for vital analysis, we would then expect to see the way that that particular device got inside of a patient, right? It didn't just teleport inside them, it needs a procedure. And so that is what we have on the right, are a few evidence-based procedures that would be what anyone would expect to code and exist sort of standard across, let's say, standard analytical fire. This is what we're seeing is both evidence-based and happening on the regular basis. So if I see the code on the left, the system would expect to see the code on the right. This is a relatively simple rule. We have CPT HCPCS. We're looking for additional CPT HCPCS. We can have more complex rules, and so I'll look at one of those now. Here is and it appears my slideshow is causing a bit of trouble, so I'm just going to exit out of that really fast. I do apologize for the sort of screen jumping. But back to this rule, a slightly more complex rule than what we just looked at. Drug charge below therapeutic dosage, right? So we all know there are a lot of drugs that are out there. Some of these are very high value or high cost to a health facility. And so we want to make sure that we're accurately capturing those costs so that this might not necessarily be like the previous rule where we'd expect to see a large revenue capture opportunity if we're missing a procedure for a pacemaker. This could much more be something that's going to be a compliance issue or a cost issue. But if we're seeing this chemotherapy drug, J9025, we know that that drug is not going to be below 75 units based on clinical practice. And we also know that that's not typically given to a patient who's under 17. And so the combination here is telling us if we have the drug and we have too low of units, or if we have the wrong age, this rule would fire. And there's nothing that's on the right side here, meaning there's nothing that we're going to look for that would solve this issue. The issue itself lies with quantity or age. So in the previous place, we've seen we can have an issue where we maybe have a device and not a procedure. We could think about we also have a procedure but not the corresponding device. We may well have a procedure and not the corresponding diagnosis code. Over here, we're seeing we can think about it by quantities, by age. And in fact, as we talk about customization, we'll see that there's a lot that we can think about for these rules. So thinking back about the rules, let's just imagine for this dual rate responsive pacemaker that you all have identified at your facility that you might not necessarily code this using the CPT code. You might only leverage a revenue code. So we can actually customize that rule basically via a custom edit that's going to be specific to a client. I'm going to pull up this rule here in the system. And when I look at this, you'll see that it is now going to demonstrate the potential to have it be a client-specific edit. I can jump in there. It has all the same information, so I could disable this for you. I could come in and say that this is going to be only for, let's say, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Great, that's wonderful. And we could also say that it's going to additionally include revenue code 360. And what that would mean is that if we see that dual rate responsive pacemaker, we see this revenue code 0360, we know that this is not a rule you want to see. So for your specific billing practice, we can customize and make sure that we're going to deliver those results to you in a way that's really straightforward. And the great part about us customizing one of our global rules is that if there are additional codes released, let's say in the next year, 6 months, or additional policies, when our content team edits Rule 782, you will still get those edits. So you're going to have the sort of expert maintenance of your rule with this overlay on top of it, where you have made this specific to your needs with Revenue Code 360, Blue Cross. Perhaps you've made it only for a certain department where you want this rule to fire, a certain patient type. Whatever those customizations are, they will exist on top of that global expert maintained rule. Now, it's quite possible that maybe we don't have a global rule, or we don't believe that a rule is maybe evidenced in such a way that we want to push that to all of our clients, but it's a rule that you need. It's an audit that you have problems with within your institution. So we can create those from scratch. I'm going to do that now. It's from this same space where you all would be able to do this, or we can support you, client-specific rules. If I come to the far right, I can actually create a new rule from scratch. So I'm going to pick something that we've all been talking about a lot lately. We're going to call it a missing COVID diagnosis. We all know that there's been very specific guidance from CMS over this time about how this works. I'm going to imagine this is actually going to be a Medicare-only rule. We'll say that it started at the beginning of this sort of period of COVID on March 1st. It's not going to end at any time because those guidelines aren't edited yet anyway. That can be changed later. I can come through and select all the various categories that are out here in terms of who it's going to impact, if it's a revenue rule, what revenue code this is going to sort of umbrella up in for reporting. But then at the bottom, it would be as simple as deciding what conditions you want for this custom rule. So as I come down here, I'm going to see that I can add various and sundry conditions. Obviously, we've talked about CPT HCPCS, but you'll notice the procedural ICDs, the diagnosis ICDs, even some of the professional CPTs are out there, rev code, et cetera. So these can be highly customizable for your needs. But let's imagine if I were making this COVID rule, I might say that it's going to be looking for one of the diagnostic tests, U0003. And then I know that that to be accepted based on current guidelines is going to need Z1159. And I know there are additional codes on both sides, but for simplicity, this would get us there. Once we completed these fields at the top, I'd be able to save this rule. And just like that, we will have made a custom edit for you all that starting at our next data process would view all of your data and process it. So we can go at 3 different levels: the global expert-led level, the overlay level where you sort of make that tweak to our expert rules, and then also that specific level for yourselves. It's a lot of power there, and it is a process that obviously requires conversation. And so that is why we always promise experts to be part of the process with you and to function sort of alongside as we make sure that these rules are really driving value for you. Another piece that we talked about is what we call case routing. So this is the automated flow of data through the system into the view for an individual team or worker. You'll see that we already have a few for this demo hospital here. So for instance, case route 12, drug rules, is telling me that any rule name that contains drug, much like the rule that we looked at earlier for therapeutic dosage, we're going to send all of those to our pharmacy department. Now, perhaps for you, that wouldn't be where you'd send them. This obviously just lets you know that it's easy to automate. And this top rule, I'm actually going to jump into the case route so we can think about how they're created. So this is rule 782, which actually is the rule for this dual chamber rate responsive pacemaker. And what we see here is that we're saying perhaps HIM or this department, these physicians are always slow to code these accounts. And so we're going to get a lot of false positives perhaps, right? We all have a department where we know that they're not as efficient as we'd like. As opposed to displaying false positives to you, we're going to take this particular case and route it to a status that we call monitoring. That would allow you to report on it so you could see that this is happening, but you're not going to have it in your daily work queue thinking I need to address this every day. It also means that as we continue to process your data, if this rule, this case is resolved, let's say they've added the procedure for that pacemaker insertion, we actually will update the status from monitoring to resolved. And so over time, you'll see that some of your back-end processes are actually capturing these items that you don't want to view because you don't want to see the quote-unquote false positive. And then beneath that, we see that we can route by more than one element. So I'm going to route 782 to monitoring, but I'm also only routing it if it's a Medicare payer. So perhaps we have other payers with quicker filing deadlines, and we know that they're better at coding those in a timely manner. So it's only Medicare that we want to route to this monitoring status. But I can make this even more specific for this automatic routing. I could come in and say, I want to do it by net revenue. If it's over 1,000, I want to see that only. Or if it's less than 1,000, if it's a specific patient type, this is all highly customizable to make sure that what we see in the product here is what you want to see. And so that really gets us to the last piece of the demo today, which is your view. This view that I have pulled up obviously has a lot of items, but as the user that I logged in as, I care about potential net. And so you'll see I have it sorted with the potential net options at the top of the screen. That obviously is one way that many of our facilities are interested in trying to think about charge capture opportunities. But we also know that lots and lots of people are interested in it in different ways. And so I could not only sort by potential net, but I might want to, within potential net, go ahead and group by service area. And so if I group by service area, which I just dragged that up to the top of the screen, I'm now looking at anesthesia services. And then within there, I'm looking at the potential net. So you'll see that anesthesia does not have a lot of value in it, at least for this particular client. If I were to alternate the area, so I can click here and sort of change that view of service area so that it's going down. I'm now at vaccine administration instead of anesthesia, right? I switched the order of the alphabet. And now I'm looking at some of these that do have potential revenue associated. And you'll notice that one can keep notes on this account. So this is a test notes that you'll see here. But we can keep a long list of notes for those audits, which of course is all about viewing the work that you've accomplished. You can audit a specific case. It started out in monitoring, it moved to in process, it's queued. However that's moving through the workflow is auditable to you, all about giving you that rule. And I've grouped by service area, but within that, I may also want to group by, let's say, rule name. And so I could drag that up there, and then within these individual service areas, I would see the specific rules grouped. I sorted by potential net, but I could come in and sort by date. I could sort by the user who is assigned to a case, and on and on. So this view is really all about giving you the access to the data that you want. Now, it's quite possible that the sort isn't the solution you're looking for. And so if I am perhaps just interested in viewing a specific rule or a specific piece of information, I have all that here on the left side. And so I could come in and I could say that I want to look for rule 782, and I could choose that rule and hit search, and obviously you're gonna be able to see that. Another nice piece about that sort of search pane that's really powerful is that you can override whatever it is that you're viewing with an account ID. So if I go back to the screen where I was viewing 50-some thousand cases, if I type in the account ID right up here at the top, it's gonna override everything that I'm seeing and display just that account ID to me. What's also really cool is that I took this ID from a single rule, rule 782, but the system's gonna demonstrate any potential rule violations that exist for that rule. So we see that here. Obviously, then the point would be that I would audit this information. So if I jump into one of these specific rules here and hit view, I'm going to see all of that same information in a details screen. I can select any individual item. So I can select here rule 782. It's going to highlight that option. And down below, it's going to highlight that C1785 is the issue that we've identified, and then sort of show all of the charges, the diagnosis codes, all of that information that we're capturing from a health system. So the audit can be performed oftentimes directly in VitalIntegrity. Once I'm completed with this item, I'm able to assign or add a note. I can also make sure that this is no longer in my work queue. So I can say that this is an audit complete billable. I could add a root cause to perhaps say that this was a coding issue. See, I can add notes, add whatever code was added. So if I added 90362, I can add that in directly. Obviously, I typed in 382, but I can add in codes. It will auto-complete those codes for you here. You would not add rabies to this, but I'm just trying to give you a demonstration there. And if I save that information, that is now going to be out of my work queue. The last piece, I know we're at time, is our reporting. It is robust and it is broad. And so I'm going to go back to our full list of 54,000 items and sort of leave us with one final view here of these charts. This is going to be a case results trend. And so this is going to be looking at over the last few months, the data that we have processed into VitalIntegrity. And so you'll see that I can both see this here as a combo chart, but also down below. For each of the last few months, it appears we had a limited number of cases. Maybe COVID finally ended. We got all our elective people back in the office, and we've got a bunch more cases now with a bunch more potential revenue. And all of this information, of course, can be modified and filtered. So I could come in here and look at this by a specific department like cardiology, and then it's going to take that same view, but show me just the results for cardiology. So with that, I'm going to pass this back off to Dusty. I appreciate all of your time and questions, and thank you for letting me be a bit of a whirlwind today. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Adam. I think hopefully y'all could see why I was excited for this webinar today. It's a pretty cool tool, something that I think could be really useful in a time when every hospital is definitely looking how to, get the most out of their charge capture. If you do have some questions or want to learn more about the solution, how it might tie into your existing patient accounting system, or just dive deeper into the tool itself. I don't know, Adam, if you have that slide available by chance, but you can just go to our website anywhere and just chat with us. But we do have a page specifically on charge capture. If you go to vitalware.com/charge-capture, there you go. And then we also have another webinar coming up next week, Wednesday on August 26th at noon, regarding just high-level view of charge capture audit. It's not about the tool or the solution. It's definitely more going into if you need to do a charge capture audit at all. And our thoughts on that. Again, we'll leave this open for a couple minutes. If you'd like, you can ask some questions to the Q&A panel. We'll make sure to follow up with you and get those answered for you. Otherwise, we really appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully you have a good rest of the day and week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.